Welcome to the Countdown Cup, ladies and gentlemen. These final few weeks will be instrumental in deciding playoff positioning and who ends up watching from home this year. The next month could mean everything for a lot of your favorite teams, especially when even more meta changes are about to be on the horizon. With Junker Queen set to receive nerfs, there's no way of telling who's going to take advantage. So what does that mean for the meta exactly in terms of predictions and general expectations? Well, a variety of different compositions should be played at least in the first week or two. According to Yiska, there's been a lot of what we saw in Stage 2 during scrims. But also don't be surprised if we see some of the stuff from Korean contenders. Support saw a lot of Ana, Lucio, and Brigitte on that region, as well as some Baptiste and double flex support when we saw Sigma and whatnot. When it comes to tanks, it'll be just about everything under the sun. Sigma, dive heroes, Zarya, anything. In DPS, that'll be all over the place. Genji Sojourn could still be usable, but I'd expect to see an uptick in Tracer for sure, and possibly even Sombra, as that's a hero that's been seeing a lot of experimentation in Korea. The slate is clean essentially, so anything's possible. Let's get into the games, and starting us off on Thursday afternoon is the Houston Outlaws and the Boston Uprising. I'd say Boston are a curious case heading into this first week. The resolve might be pretty high after finally getting through their coaching/punk fiasco, but man is this going to be a tough one. If Boston want to pull off the upset against the Outlaws, it's going to start at DPS. Valentine, Seeker, and Victoria don't really compare to the high ceiling of Pelican and Merit, so stopping them is going to be priority number one. A good game plan designed around pressuring the Houston Outlaws DPS is going to be a must. But I kind of feel like Boston's DPS line is just too inconsistent. They're not really trustworthy, especially in a big game such as this one. I'm just worried they don't have it in them. Pelican and Merit are going to take over this game in a 3-1 for the Houston Outlaws. The Outlaws, in my opinion, will look relatively angry after their tournament shortcomings last stage, and I'd expect Boston to be the victims in this situation. Now we go from one Texas team to the other as the Dallas Fuel get another crack at the Washington Justice. The Justice in this game are attempting to get revenge from the reverse sweep just a couple of weeks ago. Do they have it in them to pull off this upset? I have my doubts personally. Dallas just looked really good after their initial struggles against this Justice team during the tournament, and I think now that Dallas finally have their tournament title, they're going to come out of the gate swinging with a lot of motivation. Their energy levels will be high as they now once again know that they have it in them to pull off a championship run again this year. They proved it to themselves, so they're going to be confident. Dallas just have the more reliable team in this situation, Better tanks, better supports, and better teamwork, so I'm going to be taking the Fuel in a 4-mapper. Washington have yet to prove they can actually beat a top team this year. They can get close, but that doesn't really prove much of anything. I would not expect them to play Dallas close for a second consecutive time. The Toronto Defiant and the Atlanta Reign will conclude day one, and man, what a toughie here. This feels like an intriguing rematch, so consider this a key match of the week. It's pretty critical, not just because they're close in terms of skill level, but also because they're close in the overall standings in that playoff race. Can the Atlanta Reign bounce back in this situation after a rough stage? And how can the Defiant play after coming off such a good tournament run? So many questions with so few answers. I'd say this game comes down to tank and DPS. If Hotba and/or Muse can keep up with Hawk, that'll be a great sign. But I'd also like to see Hisu and Although continue to play at a high level. Kai speedily or whoever else they decide to play is no joke. I'm at a crossroads here, I really am. Toronto are known for disappointing, but this time really might be different. They've been mediocre for their entire existence. Maybe a good tournament run was all they needed to finally break the curse. Let's show some positivity and go for a 3-2 in favor of the Toronto Defiant. I have a lot of faith in people like Hisu and Twilight to keep this team on the right track, but I also recognize this could be a tough game as Atlanta are a very talented group. It's a 50-50 in my eyes in who wins, but I'm going to favor the team that's hot. Momentum and confidence goes a long way in this league, and I believe that Toronto discovered a lot of both at the end of the Summer Showdown. Taking up the first AM slot on Friday is the Spark and Hunters game. Because playoff implications are on the line, let's call this a key match of the week. What on earth can we expect from the Hangzhou Spark after the disaster of a stage and the random signings of support recently? Is it time for a bounce back? or is it time to panic? But they're not the only ones with questions. Can Chengdu get away with running more of their comfort picks finally? And can they actually have a decent stage for once? Man, it's all so confusing. The Spark, I'd say, feel like a real turnoff though, because I'm getting a lot of bad feelings about the direction they're heading in, especially when I have little to no trust in their head coach. These general doubts are so great that I actually see the Hunters winning in a 5-map series. The Spark obviously have the better team, that's not really up for debate, but I can't shake this feeling that they're attempting to mess with what they have. The Hunters know what they've got, and that in my books is enough to beat a Spark team with a lot of question marks. A game that's a bit easier to get a grasp on though is Seoul versus the Valiant most likely. The Valiant are in complete shambles after a bad stage, their head coach leaving, and a lot of internal drama hurting their mental. We're talking the worst team in APAC at this current point in time. It really doesn't matter what the meta is either, the Valiant feel pretty screwed, so I'd say the Dynasty just have to win 3-0 in this situation. They're just a way better team in a way better situation. And don't even think about matchups or hero changes or anything like that. In all likelihood, none of it is going to matter because Seoul are just that much better. On the topic of potential blowouts, the London Spitfire then go on to play the Paris Eternal in the first NA match of Friday. To get this over with quickly, the Eternal need to show me they can be competitive before I'm willing to even entertain the idea of them winning a game. Paris are at every disadvantage in the book, and they're playing a pretty angry London squad. Paris has talented pieces, but it's too late into the season to expect anything. London have the better experience, the better team environment, and just more playmakers in general, so they should be getting an easy 3-0 victory. London have to take advantage of a gimme matchup like this, and I think they will here. It's a total team diff. But as we move on to the Mayhem and Gladiators, things are maybe a bit more interesting. Florida are definitely riding a nice high, and the Glads are somewhat vulnerable right now. Can we count on the Glads to continue struggling? I'd say no, and for a couple of reasons. For starters, LA started to pick up some steam at the end of last stage. But second of all, I'd expect some reinforcements to help put them back in the right direction. If we see Shu and our Patty Pin and Happy maybe gets a bit more comfortable on his new team, then surely this team is going to be just fine. The Glads have otherwise been trustworthy this year, and I think the extra time off is going to do them a lot of good. This team is raring to go, and if they really do get Shu back, I believe that he'll give LA the edge in the support battle, and since I believe that Kevster is an excellent answer to the Red Hot checkmate, the Glads are going to have the advantage in at least 2 out of 3 places. If they stay out of their own way, they will win this game. Give me the Gladiators in a 3-1. They possess all the appropriate counters to Florida's best playmakers on the field, and like I said before, they ended the previous stage on a somewhat high note, so the Glads should be bouncing back. Concluding your Friday matches is a showdown between the Defiant and the NYXL. While Toronto have another tough opponent to prep for earlier in the week, they should be taking care of business in this scenario. New York, after all, are a huge mess in their current situation. Desperation could maybe help them play better in a do-or-die scenario such as this one, but they still have a lot to overcome. Twilight and Chirong are just way more consistent at support, and that's going to have a huge impact on this game. But I'm also thinking the Toronto DPS are going to look slightly better too. Even though Yaki holds his own and is the best player on the field, I think Hisu and Although is just a more stable overall DPS line. Give me the Defiant in a 3-1. Maybe New York can take a map because their desperation could potentially catch the Defiant off guard, but that's all they're going to get. So much has to go in the right place for them to even have a chance in this game. They're at a severe disadvantage in most areas, and I think the final score is going to reflect upon that. As we move back into APAC on Saturday, we have what should hopefully end up being a banger of a match. The next key match of the week between the Shanghai Dragons and the Seoul Dynasty. The rivals are going back at it once again, and you already know that Seoul are going to be hungry after dropping 3 straight to these guys. They know this team very well at this point, and they match up pretty evenly on paper. If one team in this region has what it takes to beat Shanghai, it is surely Seoul. But the Dragons are riding such a big wave of confidence currently. They've consistently beat this Seoul team recently, and they're coming off a big-time stage title victory. The Dragons, just like their counterparts in Dallas, are very momentum-based, and that's something we've known for years now. And as it currently stands, the Dragons have a ton of it. When the Dragons are playing with confidence and they're in a groove, they completely take over games, and they win stuff that they shouldn't really, and that's going to frustrate this Dynasty team, because when they're not in control, that's when their mental seems to collapse. So give me the Dragons in continued dominance in a 3 3-1 effort. Lip is playing at a different level. This guy wants to win the MVP very badly, and he won't be satisfied until the job is finally done. And until I see otherwise, I'm going to assume that Shanghai are still at the top. It's nothing against the Dynasty, it's just hard to go against Shanghai after witnessing their level of dominance. From there we get into the Hunters versus the Charge. To charge or not to charge? That is the question. How much do we invest in their good stage? Part of me wants to say that they just took advantage of other teams in the region struggling, but another part of me thinks that their roster changes have given them a major boost. Their new chance at life could see them play very well for the rest of this year, and I'd say that Choi and Krong should play pretty well in this scenario too. They desperately want to make the play-ins, and they want to just forget about the last year and a half and all of the suffering they've gone through. But also, Guangzhou's support line plus Jimmy know their opponents very well. That could play a huge role in the Charge shutting down their opponents, or at least knowing what to expect from a style standpoint. Also, it would be very Chengdu-like to beat the Spark this week, then go on to choke what should be the easier game on paper. So how about we roll with the Charge in a 5-map series? Let's give Choi and Krong a shot at the play-ins. I mean, they deserve it more than just about anybody else in this league. Let their patience pay off. Ending the APAC triple header is going to be the Valiant versus the Fusion. Now, for whatever reason, the Valiant always give Philly a scare. No matter the scenario, it always seems to happen. But the likelihood of an epic 5-map series between these two yet again seems a lot lower, as again, I firmly believe the Valiant will come into this final month of play looking very defeated. My prediction is that LA will not have their heads fully in the game, and the Fusion just have everything to play for in this scenario, so give me the Fusion in a 3-1. We'll give the Valiant a map here because they're a good matchup for this team, but that's all they're going to get, as MN3 is hungry to get back out there, and I don't think anybody on the Valiant will stop his rampage. Next is going to be my final key match of Week 21, when the London Spitfire take on the Vancouver Titans. This game is important for both sides. London to help make the playoffs, of course, and Vancouver to try and make the play-ins. It's a must-win scenario, especially for the Vancouver Titans, as they're looking to keep pace and eventually surpass Boston. Look for the Titans to push hard early on as they play with a sense of urgency. The only problem is, the Titans are not all that trustworthy still. They found very little success against significant opponents during their resurgence. They're still maybe going to be seen as underdogs to most people, as there's a lot of unknowns going on with them, and the Spitfire generally still have the better team. And now that the meta is set to change, the Titans may have to prove themselves all over again, while the London Spitfire could be getting access to the Reinhardt comp again. I feel pretty comfortable picking the Spitfire in a 4-map affair, as I think they'll just look more comfortable out there. London are a more flexible team, and I'm looking for Vancouver to prove themselves a bit more before I'm willing to fully invest in them. Anyway, the San Francisco Shock will then take on the Washington Justice. It goes without saying that Washington have a really tough week ahead of them. It almost feels overwhelming in a way. 2 shots at redemption sounds really nice, but at their current level, they're going to be heavy underdogs in both matchups. The Shock are in peak form, while the Justice we get literally depends on the day. The Justice are at such a severe disadvantage in this scenario. Their support line probably lacks the talent to keep up with Violet and Finn, and if those two get into a rhythm, it'll result in Proper and the boys looking extremely comfortable. Victory for Washington starts with the DPS, not only shutting down the Shocks, but also getting Decay and Assassin going very early. If they're not getting the same kind of resources and investments as Proper, they're in huge trouble. The Justice are just way too reliant on one aspect of their team, and the Shock are way more well-rounded, so let's give it to them in a 3-0. The coaching on the side of San Fran will find ways to pressure Decay into submission, and when that happens, the rest of the team will surely fall apart. Next is the Florida Mayhem versus the Boston Uprising, and this is one of those games that could end up going either way. Boston played Florida very close in their previous meeting, and they truthfully do match up very well on paper. DPS and support are pretty close, so I think whoever enables their tank more is going to win this game. And I'm willing to bet that Florida are the ones who do the better job. Their support line has played very well in recent games, but I'm also predicting that Checkmate maybe bothers the Boston supports enough to throw them out of rhythm, so let's give it to the Mayhem in a close 5-map series. I think no matter who wins, it's going to be a good game, just because they do match up decently on paper, and there's real potential for Boston to be a dark horse threat this stage. They have a newfound resolve, and there's a chance that Florida ends up underestimating that. And that gets us into the Sunday matches. For starters, you've got the Shanghai Dragons taking on the Guangzhou Charge, and in all likelihood, this will be a mirror image of their meetings during the Summer Showdown. The Charge get heavily outclassed in basically every way imaginable. Jimmy might be good, but Lip's playing at an elite level, and also the Dragons do end up boasting a major advantage at support most likely thanks to Izyaki's much better track record compared to Farway. It should be an easy sweep in favor of the Dragons here. I really don't see why they wouldn't win easily, as they've consistently been the way better team this year, and there's no evidence to suggest that won't continue to be the case. Wrapping up APAC for the week is the Spark versus the Fusion. When these two play, it's essentially a coin toss, but in my honest opinion, that's not going to be the case this time around. I stand by my opinion that the Spark are in a strange place. I'm committing to this idea of them starting off this stage slow until proven otherwise. And they are running into a Fusion team that is licking their lips over the thought of overtaking them in the standings. When it comes to the matchup itself, the Fusion and Spark are pretty close from a talent standpoint, so to me, it really comes down to the superstars in this scenario. Shy versus MN3. Whoever plays better could end up deciding this series. But with the Fusion being in the better headspace potentially, I suspect that MN3 is going to get the better of his hitscan counterpart, as he might have more resources to take over this game. I'm sticking with the 3-1 Andy vibes here. The Fusion have outplayed the Spark multiple times recently, and Hangzhou just feel very weird. I need to see them weather the storm first before we're ready to put some trust back in them. Next, you've got the Atlanta Reign versus the NYXL. In spite of Atlanta's recent struggles, this game should not be a problem for the boys in red. It starts at a team level for starters, as their synergy is miles ahead, but think about the difference as well at things like tank and their better overall DPS potential. Starting with the idea of tank, Hawk has just been a machine this year, and Kellen's been pretty inconsistent in his rookie year. He may not have it in him, even with some more help from Ansun Jae. Like, he might get more resources, but even then he still has to prove that he can outplay Hawk. And do I even need to bother bringing up the DPS? Kai in particular is very overdue for a huge game, which is a problem for somebody like Flora who hasn't really shown up the same way he did last year. And think about all the pieces they have to keep up with Yaki in this scenario. The young Speedily and Venom should be able to match Yaki's hero pool pretty well. You gotta give this one to the Atlanta Reign in an easy sweep. They hold all of the cards in this scenario, and they're not going to let an opportunity like this one slip away from them. Speaking of easy opportunities, next up the Dallas Fuel are going to play the Paris Eternal. The Fuel are playing with some crazy fire right now, and this Paris team is still taking baby steps. There's not much to discuss here. Dallas are going to speed run a 3-0. Dallas are just a country mile ahead of their competition in this one. We're talking some of the best players in the entire league versus a bunch of newbies. It'll be over before you even have time to blink. Next, we have the Outlaws versus the San Francisco Shock. In theory, this matchup can always be a lot of fun, but Houston have literally given us no reason to trust them. Every opportunity that they get to make a splash usually gets wasted, and their track record against San Francisco is obviously not very good. Proper seems to have this mental edge over his former teammate in Pelican and usually ends up outperforming him. The Outlaws truly don't match up half bad on paper, but there's something they're lacking against this team. You could maybe chalk it up to a weaker support line, but I'd like to think that it's a fundamental thing. The players and coaches on the Shock just know something that Houston do not. The Outlaws do not know how to beat the Shock. I don't make the rules. The Shock should end up winning this 3-1 as they keep their streak against Houston alive. Until I see the Outlaws prove me otherwise, I'm going to continue to pick the Shock to beat them every single time. I have no reason to go against who is clearly the better team. Pelican and Merit simply cannot do enough here. It's a fundamental diff. And last but not least will be the Gladiators versus the Titans. Again, the mindset remains the same on the side of Vancouver. If I think they struggle with London, then they're going to struggle against the Glads. Vancouver are largely unproven against top-level teams. It's cool that DP could get his revenge potentially against his former team, but he just doesn't have the resources or the talent to keep up in this situation. If he wants to win this game, it is going to start with him in designing a sick game plan. But I fear that simply will not be enough, as he's clearly outgunned here. The might of the LA support line is going to be far too much for the Titans to handle, and I really don't see a world where they're slowing down Kevster. They do not have an answer for him on that DPS line. LA get the 3-0 here, plain and simple. I like the Titans, and I truly do hope they pull off a comeback this year, but the likelihood of defeating the Gladiators is slim to none. If the Glads come out and play angry the way we saw at the end of last stage, then the Titans get dominated on all fronts for sure. Until Vancouver can show us they can actually beat a team of this caliber, there's just no worlds where we can trust them to pull off an upset. I truly hope that the Titans prove me wrong though, as it would be amazing to see them pull this off. I'm rooting for them hard for sure. But anyway, that's going to do it for predictions here in week 21. What do you think's going to happen in the opening week of this stage? Who wins and who loses, and what heroes do we see? Let me know down in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video and you want to see more just like it, be sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel if you're new. And until next time, this is ATP, signing out. Peace.